You know what? You know
Yeah.
what? It needs to be amateurs. We all need to be amateurs. There's no perfecting anything on this world plane, so why pretend, right?
Well, exactly. And, unless we're talking about soul, which is the only place that we can truly even experience perfection, it doesn't exist. Let's not pretend and set that stress up because
Yeah.
it is really, ineffectual to stress. And we'll talk about that too, because
Right.
stress is a non-specific signaling and it can go anywhere in your body.
That's very true.
Yes. So let's finish this story about yesterday.
Yeah.
We were craving each other and our soul sister time. And it was like, oh my God. Okay. So we get down there and I have just been like downloading information on this crazy predicament that we're in right now. And I've been trying to make sense of what is a virus? Why are we reacting to it like this? And when the hell is there going to be some decent information that's coming out that actually empowers people versus creates all this fear and disempowerment? So I've done several talks on this so far, and I literally just start sweating because I'm like, this is what is the truth about a virus. So let's start there.
We're both on fire for this fucking shit, right?
Oh, yeah. This is not about human health only. The viruses are everywhere. Viruses, and we'll get into the vastness of them, are the network and the communication, not the communication, but the information that's in the soil, the water, and the air. Bottom line, we can't survive without them. And we're going to explain why they're not attacking us.
Exactly.
They're only here for our genomic upgrade, our genetic upgrade.
We are surrounded by friends. We are surrounded by friends.
Yes. And this is, it's not the virus. And I do want to explain what a virus is and what it isn't. But a virus doesn't actually have the ability to attack you. The information that comes from a virus is in and out of your body within 3 to 5 days. So
let's talk about what a virus actually is. It's not even a living organism, or considered living according to the definition of living. It's more like let's talk about what it is. Start with, but we're definitely going to marry how these things interact with each other and what our place is in the natural environment. Like, yes, we are here to be participants and stewards of not only our gardens of our bodies, but our gardens in our living life. So we're here to talk about the bridging between the body, between the soils, and our place, a beautiful place as participants in those scenarios.
So let's begin with the difference between the virome and the microbiome, because it's really important because the mind does work with compare and contrast. Let's compare and contrast these two. Most people have heard of the microbiome. I myself I'm very new to the virome, and it's the only thing that makes sense. And I honestly had never heard of the virome. And so when I did, I was like, well, what is that? So let me just explain a few things about what it is. The virome is the vast genomic information that covers the world and has since the beginning of time. Why? And where did it come from? So billions and billions of years ago, when we had archaea and protozoas and these single and multi-cell organisms, they could only replicate by very slow means like fermentation. And eventually, millions of years later, they developed metabolisms where they could use food from the outside world, like sugars, etc., to accelerate and replicate themselves.
Okay.
Well, like within billions of years later, these multi-cell organisms, archaeas, protozoas, bacteria, etc., start to express information. Up until this point, the only way that a cell could replicate itself in a bacteria was really bumping into each other or metabolizing something from the outside world. But now their process is now sending out genomic information. So now, for the very first time, you literally have information that can jump literally from pond to pond, from continent to continent through the airstream. And this is the birth of the virome. This virome is so vast. Now, from the virome, we actually get fungi. And fungi, as we know, have an even more extraordinary, faster metabolism because they send their enzymes out into the world and then decompose things. So they've externalized their stomach. So what has happened with the virome? Just to give you a little indication on how vast this is, and that is coming from the communal density of the microbiome. Viruses are not living, they're just genomic information. Nothing in nature lives in isolation. And the only way that we have survived so far is through communal and colonization and really building up as much diversity as possible so that we can always be synchronizing and adapting to balance. So there's a thing I want to jump ahead real quick and explain the difference between about inflammation, because people are really concerned, like, oh, the root cause of all disease is inflammation. That's true when it comes to chronic inflammation, but whenever you add new life forms, new information, new bacterial diversity, you have this acute phase of inflammation. The body is literally the soil, the water, the air, the communities, the colonization have to adapt. Now, during this adaptation period of acute inflammation, this is where you have some symptoms. You might feel sick or ill or have some chills. This is the body mobilizing the ingredients, the information, and the reserves that we have in our body to repair, to balance out, to get back to balance. Now, after acute inflammation, you go back to balance. Your body's literally adapted and upgraded genomic information. Don't try not to get sick. What happens then when it goes to chronic inflammation is that the body's literally so overwhelmed and taxed by existing conditions or toxins or traumas and all these things that it can't live in this reserve of repair space. And when you don't repair, you can't regenerate. So, and we'll get into like why some people in the soil and the planet, all these things aren't regenerating, because it does have so much to do with the diversity and the lack of diversity that we're literally poisoning our planet with right now. And we're poisoning the people with stress. And stress to me comes from one of the doctors I study is Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a PhD, Bruce Lipton. He's a biologist and he studied stem cells. And he's the one who said, the term epigenetics. We all say, oh, it's my DNA. Your DNA is only expressed because and due to its environment. So if your environment's really happy and healthy and diverse and communal, and it can adapt to acute inflammation, you're always going to be upgrading. Now, what happens when we have information that goes into overload or overdrive? Well, it depends on the condition and the person, but sometimes it doesn't go so well. So Bruce Lipton, biologist who studied stem cells, used to teach that we're kind of slaves to our DNA. But what he realized, when you put a stem cell in a petri dish, it literally can turn into anything it wants: a liver cell, a muscle, a neuron, skin, etc. So what differentiates what it turns into? Its environment. And so our DNA is always expressing good or bad depending on our internal and external environment. And that can include thoughts, toxins, and traumas. That's the definition of stress. The air pollution has a lot to do with why this virus is actually having a higher stress point on so many individuals. So air pollution is really interesting. It's dirty, so it's toxic. And there's something called PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5 microns. That's the size, and it's very tiny. So in air pollution, it literally clusters synthetics, chemicals, and viruses. So there are certain things that make people a really good host for this virus. And I'll go into those later, but let's just say you are a really good host from taking prescription drugs, not having good colonization, diversity, a strong microbiome, especially all throughout your brain cavity, which is your upper respiratory tract, which includes your nose, your middle ear, your mouth, your throat, all the way down. And you get this virus in concentrated amounts by breathing it. Well, take on top of that certain prescription drugs like ACE2 inhibitors, which come from blood pressure medicines and cholesterol. Then you have more receptors that can literally uptake this genomic information. But interestingly enough, what we're finding is that PM 2.5 in air pollution actually clusters cyanide too. So all the synthetics, herbicides, pesticides, glyphosate, glyphosate, however you say it. I'm trying to say glyphosate, but I've been saying it wrong for so long, it's challenging. It clusters this, and let's just reel back real quick to glyphosate. It is a water-soluble molecule. We are 70% water, and it becomes this promiscuous, carcinogenic toxin in us. And whenever you have something that's carcinogenic, it's literally killing you on a cellular level. And I want to actually quote Zach Bush on this, because Zach Bush is where I'm getting most of this information from. Check him out, Zach Bush, MD. He's a triple board certified physician, and he's the only one who makes sense of how our environment, literally our soil, is bringing us closer to human extinction than we've ever seen. And it's because of the carbon and the pollution that is contributing to human degradation. Okay, carcinogen accelerates genetic injury. Carcinogens accelerate genetic injury. We express our environment. If our environment is toxic, we're going to kind of skip over the acute inflammation and adaptation phase and go right into, 10, 20 years later, chronic conditions. Remember, we don't get sick by accident. We ignore symptoms and our body's language of expressing itself. We lack body literacy.
Well, can I jump in there real quick?
Yes.
I think that has to do with the fact that, so when they do slow and small changes, how we're so resilient that we adapt, and we have this beautiful childlike ability to forget and remember. We're almost like going through a room with a candle.
Yes.
You know? And so when you make changes in the room, the next time around with that candle, you're really not going to remember it. So these little incremental stresses, we need to forgive ourselves and just understand that the way forward towards truer communication about this is to actually have community where we're sharing knowledge together, reminding each other, holding each other in our hearts, being accountable, checking on your neighbor. Just that expression of love is what's going to allow us to carry forward this message.
Yes, and that community needs to be diverse, right? It doesn't have to.
Yeah, sorry.
It's like the difference between a society and a community. The word that society sometimes is just such a turnoff because I have this perception of it. But the idea of a community with diversity and expressions that don't always match our own, but we adapt to them. We become more intelligent when we're exposed to other points of view. We're not in lockdown. So I want to go back to pollution and cyanide. So this is really
important. Thank you.
I'm
glad you're not stoned. Go.
I did take your advice yesterday, and I did smoke, and I was just like, we should talk about that another time.
Let's do that. Yeah, another cover. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is the research of many physicians. So listen really carefully because this is actually going to sound like coronavirus. So when you exhale, you actually are exhaling a little bit of cyanide with each breath. And there's cyanide all over because at least 1,000 plant species also release cyanide. And remember, when you have air pollution, cyanide is clustered and more concentrated. So what happens when you breathe in cyanide consistently? Cyanide goes in and attacks the hemoglobin, the red blood cells that deliver oxygen throughout your system. The red blood cells become deformed and they don't deliver oxygen. So the issue with a lot of people in areas of high pollution is not putting a ventilator on. It's not the lack of oxygen. It's the lack of oxygen transport. Their body, even if they have a respirator on, can't transport the oxygen. And so this is when the virus comes in and it starts to attack. They don't have a good microbiome and they don't have a good epithelial lining, which the alveoli are part of. And unfortunately, this barrier is the thinnest in the lungs. So this is another reason why your diversity in your microbiome and your soil and your life, inner and outer, is so important because literally your life and your health depend on this diversity. So the virus gets in, let's say, along with some cyanide and other toxins that are accumulated in this air pollution, and you're a good host. 99% of us should be, the barrier in the microbiome should protect us by 99% from this virus attacking and plugging into a cell. Now, let's say it kind of gets into the bloodstream, and it's like, okay, we have two backup systems in our immune system. We have, from our lymphatic system, we have B cells and we have T cells. Now, the viruses come in and your body's like, well, what the hell is that? And the B cell from the bone marrow, that's part of the lymphatic system, that the endocannabinoid system regulates and is profound and very proficient through, attacks the virus. It literally changes its shapes, attacks it, kills it, destroys it, and then that B cell creates memory, a B memory cell. So every time that virus comes in, and the only way it can come in is through people exhaling it. So once it's in your lungs, that's when you start to exhale. It's not like everyone's breathing out this virus, but you have to take it in, you have to breathe it out. So another way, let's say your B cells are like, the B cells don't attack cells, they just attack sort of what's in the bloodstream. So let's say the virus actually gets into the cell, and the B cell is helpless now, it's not its purpose. You have the T cell, which is derived from the thymus, which is part of the lymphatic system, and that T cell is systemically scanning your body for infected cells. It can engulf that cell and eat and destroy that cell. This is really important because T and B cells both make T and B memory cells. So your body should be adapting. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have acute inflammation. Celebrate if you do, because this virus leaves your body within 3 to 5 days. You may have acute inflammation from this genomic upgrade that your B and T cells are actually taking care of. You have to have a strong immune system. You have to have reserves, and you have to have diversity to have that microbiome and that epithelial layer first, because that's your first line of defense is from diversity and colonization within your entire upper respiratory tract. Well, we've addressed cyanide.
Yeah.
I want to go back into what a retrovirus. Let's explain what a retrovirus is, because corona is sort of a retrovirus. And and I want to make sure that we understand why retroviruses are not scary either. So first, let's make the landscape of how vast viruses are, just so that you know, like, they're everywhere. So 10 to the 31 means 10 to the 31 viruses in the air, in the water. That means that there are millions more viruses in our air and water than there are in all the stars of the entire universe. You cannot live without this virome. It is genetic information that is keeping our Earth alive from the balance and integrity of the microbiome from which it comes from. So it is vast. When a baby is born, baby is not making, within the first week, the baby's not making any antigens. It can't attack anything. And by the time a baby is born, within the first week, it has 10 to the 8 viruses in its feces. It is getting genomically updated every single day. And that is a lot of viruses. And it's not attacking the baby. It is just there to upgrade the genetic information so that those stem cells can literally turn in and keep reproducing. Okay.
Can I just pause you there just to relate it back to natural farming? So these very stem cells in a plant are the top 4 inches of a plant, and the reason they're clustered there is because that is where that is the most sensitive area for it to be getting all of the information that it needs to then create that kind of conversation that is happening in a very similar signaling pattern all the way through the plant. So it's literally coming into communication with its environment, real time, real place. And so, yeah, cool. It's fucking, that's not as above, so below. And
oh my God, absolutely. And I'm sure most people on here have watched Kiss the Ground. And this is really a profound movie because through NASA, they show through harvest and this time of the year between the 3rd week in October and the 3rd week of November, why we call it flu season. It's really called carbon, like CO2 poisoning, right? Our immune systems, the air is red. We have too much there's nowhere for it to go. And so this is human toxicity season. I didn't make that up. That's from Zach Bush. This is human toxicity season because there's more carbon in the air. We're starting to have colder temperatures. By the way, this coronavirus is considered a cold virus. Another way to be a good host for this virus is that it can't replicate at body temperature. It has to be colder than body temperature. Now, when you breathe in cold air, along with concentrated clusters of the virus and maybe cyanide, that you become a better host to cold air. So you have to keep your body warm. You got to keep your body temperature up. This is why drinking things like warm teas and taking hot baths and just keeping yourself warm, exercise, etc. It's a really good first line of defense too for making your body not. You can still get the virus, but it's not going to be It's not going to be destructive. You're not going to go past acute inflammation. Now, why are people experiencing symptoms? Again, I want to express that many doctors feel this way. No one is dying from coronavirus. It leaves your body within 3 to 5 days. And within those 3 to 5 days, even if you have chronic conditions, your body's already updated in that genomic information. You've already adapted to it. So here's the situation that we're in for many reasons, and this reflects the soil, that 40% of Americans have at least 2 chronic diseases. Now, I think a lot of those chronic diseases come from how we're treating our soil and our food. When we have disrupted, imbalanced, and carcinogens on our soil, which we know glyphosate and glyphosate are, and we're putting that into the air, we're putting that into the food, it is the perfect, most susceptible and systemic setup for chronic illness. By let's see, 52% of all children under the age of 16 have chronic conditions. And we know within the next generation, we're going to see an even bigger upswing of cancers and chronic diseases in younger people and older people because of all this desanitizing that we're doing. Remember, a virus does not fit the germ theory. You can't kill something that's not even alive. Your biggest line of defense is starting with the soil and the soil within your body. Like you're doing with the dirt and all those microbes, like just bathing in them and rolling in them. We need to be in better contact with our food, our soil, and all the diversity that life has to offer, because it's our only way to get to preserve life on Earth. Because most people would agree, most experts would agree, we're very close to human extinction if we don't start with the soil. And that's really the trigger for why we are as sick as we are, because the glyphosate comes into the air, it's water soluble, we breathe it in, it goes downstream. So you see a lot of the southern states having more rates of cancer and chronic diseases. It's because of the airstream. And by the way, the virus doesn't like hop on a plane on a person and get delivered from California to Pennsylvania. It's everywhere. Remember, it's everywhere. It's like a quantum information. It's tiny, tiny, tiny quantum.
Can we talk about that part just for a second?
Yeah.
Because it's like RNA, right? And so the one book I really liked that kind of got me to understand, or my understanding, he gave me a really thorough understanding of how RNA works. And that is regenerate from
Sire G.
Right. Yeah. And so my understanding, if I was to put RNA signaling in my own, the way I see it happening, it's kind of like a lot like a terpene. So it's this interesting message that contains within it all of the information of the life of that thing that is putting that terpene together to be expressed into the atmosphere. And I actually think that terpenes do behave in an RNA fashion, and we can get to that and go down that fucking rabbit hole all day long. But so I do believe terpenes are actually RNA. I love it as a vehicle for understanding because it's expressing all of its information, and you then are receiving all of that information from that plant. So,
yeah.
Right. And so that is kind of how RNA works. And so the virus to me is RNA. So it has that capacity to be both expressed in a language that's then received in the exact language with which it was given.
I love this. And this is something I really want to dig into. Sorry, my phone almost died. I thought it was plugged in. I'm trying to set my setup up again. If it doesn't work well with my phone.
I'm going to start eating my sandwich. Are you having fun? This is amazing, right?
I love this. So RNA is really important because it's where the ribosomes are. And It's literally how we signal, just like terpenes, out into the world. And like you and me right now and everyone listening, we are signaling our internal environment all the time. And so I'm standing here and I'm setting exosomes from my RNA out into the world all over the place. And I'm feeling yours and you're feeling mine. And we don't really acknowledge it because it's so normal, but it's happening nonetheless. So this is the part of the virus, the virome, that I want to understand is it is an exosome, and retro means backwards. So literally it's a backwards virus. And let me go into into a cell. Think of a retrovirus like a USB port. It's just information. It's been birthed from a community and a collective that's highly intelligent called the microbiome, whether that's in the soil or whatever. For this purpose, it's from the soil. And then you put it into a USB port. The USB port actually gets plugged into a cell. Now, that cell, the only way you can update this information and keep this information, because you want to keep it, is that the cell replicates and passes that information on. But it's not living, so the virus can't, like a germ, spread. It has to go into the DNA of a cell. And then when that cell replicates, it passes that information on. We can't think that putting a mask on and quarantining is going to kill this virus. It's here. It's here. It's part of in trillions and trillions of wherever you're at, where that space is that you are at, is filled with viruses. Viruses don't attack us. They are here for genomic upgrades. The problem is our soil is dead. We turned our soil into dirt, and that dirt isn't regenerating. And so all this carbon's being lifted into the air. That carbon's contributing to pollution, and the pollution is clustering viruses and cyanide and synthetic chemicals and glyphosate, and all these things that literally, if we don't have the reserves and an internal diversity within our body, we are totally set up for disease. And we are doing ourselves a real disfavor by taking pharmaceutical drugs. They are not the solution. They are part of the problem, because they are literally dismembering your innate intelligence that comes from the microbe. They're disrupting it. And whenever you disrupt something, you either adapt or you don't. And that's where the chronic inflammation is. Chronic inflammation is just the lack of adaptation. Our soil, the chemicals that we're putting onto it, are adapting by becoming weed resistant, bacterial resistant. We are adapting in really kind of dysfunctional ways, but our soil and our weeds and our plants haven't had any other tools but to adapt to this dysfunction. And it's crazy how well they're adapting by all these resistant weeds. And look how many more diseases people have. They're all really the same thing. They may be in different organs or your blood or your brain, from neurodegeneration to neuropathy to Crohn's, IBS, cancer. The root cause really comes back to lack of diversity, stress, bad food, bad soil, all these things.
And genetic signaling that is telling our bodies that we need to actually evolve because life is thriving. And so that's the other thing I loved Sawyer for, was just his ability, like when he talked about how it's, we're always in succession, where life is always moving. And so when we're faced with this kind of level of pollution and the death of our microbial communicating ability, then we are evolving back towards almost like a pre-oxygen condition that is what did he call it? A meso 1 condition. And he even says that and that's where you interestingly get into the facultative anaerobic bacteria and things that we're going to be talking about as natural scientists soon. So it really, life is still thriving, but it's just trying to thrive through our evolving bodies to match the polluted conditions that we find ourselves in.
Here's a good thing about our soil. Our soil has one gram of soil contains 10 to the 9 amount of viruses. It can't survive without this genetic information. Right. It can't survive. And we're witnessing this. Look at our food supply. We are fucking sick. So let's talk about nutrition real quick. Yes, we are let's just even say this. Our shit is sick.
Our shit we need to get our shit healthy again.
We should shit healthy again.
And then we need to close the poop loop, which is, we'll just talk, that's going to be a whole nother show. You're coming back on.
Oh, good. I love this. So where was I? Okay. So, no, I should lose. Oh, nutrition. I want to talk about how we upgrade our genetic, our microbiome. I love what you're doing in the dirt. So everyone pay attention, because what she's doing is revolutionary revolutionizing our concept of how microbes work in community. And you can't isolate even these communities. They're meant to evolve and be exposed to each other. They literally start to bump into each other, and these cool things happen where genetic information can cross these bumpers and turn into new upgraded information. But we can't sterilize ourselves into health. And this is what I'm really into, the endocannabinoid system, and the endocannabinoid system is a huge part of this conversation. But I want to talk about the endocannabinoid system, which is a signaling system. When your body isn't signaling and signaling internally and signaling externally, it's a form of stress. It's a form of breakdown. So the immune system and the endocannabinoid system, which is actually your largest system, need to be fed with real food. Organic food, essential fatty acids, and supplements.
So local, like we need to find the people that are growing in the soils that we are building for microbial diversity. So you need to get out there and find your farmer who's actually truly doing the work of regenerative restoring diversity, because I'm here to tell you that it is 100% doable. It is 100% scalable, and not everyone is doing it because this is a new thing. We need to teach each other. We need to be transparent. We need to find out where our true foods are being grown, because if you have true food on that level of nutritional diversity, you will not need to take supplements.
Yeah. In the beginning, I think a lot of people need supplements, though.
Really?
Just because we've depleted ourselves so severely. And that rebuilding process, you need strong antioxidants. You need a certain amount of omega-3s. You need some micro and macro vitamins, especially minerals.
Oh, yeah. Minerals. Fuck, hell yes. Okay, I got you. All right.
I think the end result would be that you don't need them, unless like you're depleting more than you're getting in. In some of the ways that you can tell that you're depleted more than you're like getting replenished is by, just learned this today, visceral fat is actually a sign that your body's mitochondria is dysfunctioning. And so your body's actually like degenerating, and it starts to show up as adipose tissue or adipose fat around the abdominals. So that mitochondria sometimes needs a little boost, but the body's meant to adapt and regenerate, and it can. And when you give it all the right information, but don't expect it to happen overnight. You didn't get sick overnight. It's probably been a long time since you've had headaches or chronic drip or gut issues, digestive issues, sleep issues, stress, etc. So start with food. Food is really your most important medicine, but just know in the beginning, eventually you won't have to supplement, but in the beginning, it's probably a good thing because your body may not even...
Can I just say one more quick thing, just because I'm also looking at the conversation, and I want to address Kristen's says, and okay, Kristen, don't be upset with me if I seem to put you on the spot here a little bit, but I think it's an important thing to kind of bring in to consideration. So Kristen says, I'm so pissed with the government and the disinfecting pressures they put and stress on the people. What the fuck is wrong with them? So, yeah, I feel like we're at that place where we all get to make these decisions about how we're aligning ourselves. And I feel like some of the things that have happened because of our political system, which includes a force of two. There's no natural system that has a force of two. In a super diverse environment, you're going to have a multitude of inputs, and you're going to have more than two systems. And so we are under a false, unsustainable system of influence. You can choose your realm of influence. And where that is with your food, with your neighbors, with your friends, with yourselves, with the people you love. We have no control over what we're seeing in the media.
No,
And
we
let's
don't.
just put it at that. So yes, they may be, when I'm in a restaurant and they want me to put that stuff on my hands, I don't do it. I
I don't
won't
either.
put poison on my hands. I would rather walk in, and I actually, this is how I inoculate.
It's like I can't even put the mask over my nose, and every once in a while, someone will ask me, "Could you please?" And I do, but I'm like, the whole thing just. But I want to say something really positive about the coronavirus. I
Yeah,
do
I'd love to.
Yeah, and this is really the pandemic of possibilities. We actually, scientists and doctors actually thought that the virus was part of the microbiome, so they started studying the virus. So we actually owe the intelligence and the knowledge that is coming out of the virome to the coronavirus, because it's such a virus is so small, and that's why we included it with the microbiome, which is a living thing because of its size. Micro means small and biome means living organism. And so because of this coronavirus and some really strong intelligent thought leaders trying to figure out what's going on and what's actually killing people, it's not the virus. We actually developed and were able to go back to the beginning, literally the beginning of time, and look at where the virome came from and understand that it's just genetic information. We've known about viruses, but we didn't know that it was just truly like this dead thing. We thought it's part of a living organism. It's not, it's birthed from it. It's a result of it.
It's kind of like the coolest, most ninja like book of information that gets like it's like if you receive the the virus's information, it's like I see it like receiving a hologram of
Oh my God, it's so profound. That's exactly what it's like. And the hologram doesn't have any life form. It's just like there for you, for your body to go, got it. Now I'm smarter.
Right.
Or that's all this does is make our water smarter, our air smarter, our soil smarter. Information, we always need more and more and more information. And the immune system is adaptive. Our soil is adaptive. Everything should be adapting, because just like the cliche, you either adapt or you die. And, if spiritually, no one dies until they're ready.
There's no stagnation either. So back to inflammation, like that stagnating, it's like that fear or flight, the stress. Let's go there for a second. Let's go to the effect of stress when it comes to like fight or flight and what kind of condition it puts you in. And like,
so here's a good analogy. When someone gets an organ transplant, they're given immune suppressants. And those immune suppressants are then in form of stress steroids. Stress literally knocks down the immune system so it can't function. You can't biologically be running from a tiger in fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system and regenerate.
That's a good analogy.
And by regeneration, I don't mean just like, how do I look? Because our hair should always be growing. Every single part of our body is regenerating. It needs to regenerate at a certain frequency. When we drop down in that frequency, we begin the very beginnings of chronic disease, because the cells are coming in at a lower frequency. And everything is energy, ultimately. So stress, literally, there's so many forms of stress, but remember, toxins, thoughts, and traumas. These are the most important forms of stress that affect us all. And when we stress, remember, stress signals, and it's a non-specific signal, which means it can go anywhere in the environment or anywhere in your body.
It sounds like a virus itself. We are probably propagating and proliferating a certain type of communication through our stress patterns, much like the virus does, in fact.
Let's talk about fear real quick.
Yeah, let's do that.
So RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr., is on this campaign, and he's really liberating people about the bullshit. And the bullshit is, historically, Hitler's right-hand man was on trial, and they're asking him, how did you take such an intelligent civilization, the Germans, highest level of intelligence at that time, and make them do horrible, horrible things to themselves? And he said, fear. When you infect a society with fear, you begin to control them. We have to stop fearing this virus because it's not alive. It's literally here for our genomic update. It's one of trillions and trillions and trillions of viruses that are on us, in our food, in our air, in our wire. There's no escaping. There's no isolating. There's nothing you can do to kill a virus. They are everywhere. What are we fearing? What are we fearing? Our own
the
health?
unknown. We're fearing the unknown. We don't know what to do about it. And we're looking outside of ourselves because we've been taught through this modern world of distractions and delusions that we need to find our healing outside of ourselves, when it literally is inside of us, in our own hearts. We have the capacity to know it by becoming healed, by like eating amazing food, like surrounding ourselves with microbial diversity, all of it.
It really comes down to diversity. There's a few principles here, right? Stress less. Feed yourself nutrient-dense foods, because also stress is highly inflammatory. So I think it is like a virus. I love that. Like a hologram virus. It's like, oh, and it's contagious, and it's like a disease. There's so many things that stress is. And stress, let me back up for a second. Stress isn't all bad. Stress is literally how we adapt. So without stress, we would never adapt. But when that motility phase where the stress comes in and your body starts mobilizing the information it needs from the immune system and other systems to adapt and upgrade, that's good. But it's when the stress becomes chronic and it never shuts off is when we have the problem.
Do you think that's PTSD? That defines PTSD. It's like,
Yeah.
And also with plants, like it's like when you stress a plant and you do 2 stresses, or a plant takes about a week to recover from a stress. When you put 2 stresses on it, you're not like at the same time, you're not like it's 2 weeks. So with PTSD, so every time you get a trauma, like within that 2 weeks of restorative time with a plant, you get another stress, then it's 3 weeks. To where, and it's like you never get ahead of the curve with too many traumas. And
I love that.
That describes PTSD. That's amazing.
And we relive traumas. And so I worked with a doctor who did a big study on PTSD, and we found, interestingly enough, 80% of the population running around with PTSD are women and children. And it's not like we call it we don't call it PTSD. But these women and children, including myself, are on the spectrum of PTSD, and that is anxiety, withdrawal, overwhelm, depression, and insomnia.
Okay, I'm there. Just saying.
I mean, who isn't, right?
Right.
Because remember, stress is thoughts, toxins, and traumas. And unfortunately, even if you don't have toxins or bad thoughts, or even if you don't have trauma and bad thoughts, we still have a lot of toxins that are bombarding us all the time.
And that lack of ability to get back to that regenerative moment. So then our immune systems are falling down the tubes.
And the only thing we really need is balance.
Yeah.
And balance isn't one of those things that once you get it, you keep it. You're always working for it, because it's like it's like this in nature, right? And if you seasons change, air changes, temperature changes, stuff from the environment changes. So you're always trying to just find a non-static balance, something that's mobile and fluid. And it's not like this, right? Or it's not like way down here. But all we need for real, true regeneration is more balance.
Let's have a dance party. All right, who in here is up for a dance party that allows us to find that balance and flow? Go! Oh my goodness!
I have a new favorite song. It's called "Give No Fucks."
Give no fucks. Okay,
it is so good. I work out to it as often as I possibly can. And one of the things, speaking of exercise, one of the best things you can literally do for yourself is exercise. It up regulates your signaling systems. And if you're not communicating internally and externally, we start to not adapt.
Right.
And exercise can just be, we can't get to it, just deep breathing sometimes and just getting that lymphatic system flowing. And remember, in that lymphatic system, we have the B cells and the T cells, and they need to be at high alert at all times because Lord knows, even as much as we're trying to live in a sterile environment, it's the absolute worst thing in the world for us. We cannot live in a sterile, isolated environment. We need balance, community, diversity, colonization. We need to express adaptation to stressors. We're never going to not have stress. It's the lack of adaptation, which should be a short amount of time. I know. I like literally thank you for bringing me on because I love this so much. And when I started to understand this, I started to feel like I could breathe again because I've gone through the whole cycle of like, should I like, is everyone I love going to die? And I've been sad and I've been angry and I've been frustrated. But I like what you said earlier. We don't have to fight any more systems. No. We just start doing it our own way. What's happening in the world, if it doesn't regenerate, it's not sustainable. If it's not sustainable, it's dying. So what we're doing will outlive and preserve and create a whole new race of people because we are getting the information.
And we're sharing the information. And by community, we gain so much truth.
Yes. Well, I would love to continue this conversation because the virome is only getting bigger and better. And it's only information that we can learn to understand and share because I want everyone to share. If you're curious about the virome, look up Zach Bush MD. I'll put it in the comments.
Oh, good. I'm in a typing little fool over here.
Zach Bush. He makes everything complicated really understandable. And one of the things that he has is a humic product. That you spray in your nose that literally starts to regenerate and recolonize the microbiome and the epithelial lining. So if you're one of those people who do have chronic diseases, I would be taking your health very seriously. And this is another principle, and we can almost end with this because this principle can save your life. We heal faster than we injure. And we need to heal faster than we injure.
True. It's so true. And take the time and honor ourselves in doing that and make it a priority and really actually do it instead of finding back doors because of our stress. Commit.
Yes, and maybe it's just stress is what you start with. And I don't know, that's another conversation is the whole stress thing. Right. But the body is so regenerative. When you start with, take one thing that is injuring yourself and eliminate it, your body can start to regenerate within hours, days, months. But we have to heal faster than we injure. which
So
means you have to take responsibility and stop doing some of the things that are injuring you. And you can replace them with things like exercise and less processed foods, and make sure that you get all the Roundup and glyphosate out of your
number
diet.
one, just get it out.
Number one.
Just take it to your local landfill so that they can distribute of it some way down a remedial future that we will definitely be having to face in our lifetime.
Oh yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, God, you just keep bringing up so many things. Let's take a pause, because there's something I wanted to ask you or bring up. I wanted to get it back to our dinner last night.
Oh yeah, and I brought the perfume too.
Oh my God. Okay, so I wanted to explain what happened. Like, just by being in this microbial IMO 4 pile, the amount that I have been in it, and I had spent the entire day bathing in it that day, and just before I met with Christy. And my understanding of the type of microbes that I'm working with. Cheers, dabs up, y'all. Good vibes. Thanks, Tara Lee. I love you. I can't wait.
Thank you, Tara.
The type of expression in the microbes that I'm working with in this pile, and because I know what I know about them being what they are, yeasts and facultatives, and having this ability to do this biofilm, and there is so many levels to go on that, but just understanding through my direct experience with my body of the microbiome. So it really is literally going outside and putting your feet in the ground. I mean, then your communication with your biome of your planet is already starting. Simply by taking off your feet, off your shoes, and standing barefoot and letting that communication happen with your feet. Because what was crazy, and I just want to tell it like this. Okay, so the prairie, when you go out to the prairie, I first noticed this flower when I saw it in its full bloom, and I recognized it as a plant that was in my yard, my garden. And what I noticed most profoundly was that the color that was being expressed was so vivid, like nothing I'd ever seen. It was the yellowest yellow. It seemed to have light just emitting from it. And I was like, how is that possible? And then that question has lingered with me through all of my explorations of gathering up indigenous microorganisms from the prairie and working with them in relationship to clays. There's an extensive relationship issue here. It goes deep, but I had to give a little bit of background for you to understand the beauty. Those are the microbes I'm working with, the same ones that there's a facultative anaerobic bacteria that has the ability to completely enter the plant to get to that very height of expression where it is expressing that particular type of color. And it is that microbe expressing itself through the body of the plant. So we are literally being communicated with, not just as one or a duality. We're being communicated with through this path of expression that allows for our bodies to be transmutable and flexible and open and
mobile and mobilizing information.
Yeah.
Like the difference between, I love that. And I learned so much from you. Like the difference between the vibrant color and maybe a dull color came from the soil, the information. Oh, wow. What's that?
Dude, this is the skin layer.
This is the epithelial lining?
Yeah, this is what it looks like in the human.
So this lining is absolutely a necessary barrier. And we have barriers on purpose because there are some things that should get in and there are some things that should get in, and there's things that should not get in. And if you think of your epithelial lining on your skin, this is an organ. It's the largest organ we have in our body. And you can think of it like a cell membrane. It's letting stuff in and it's letting stuff out. And so you've got to put good stuff on your biggest cell membrane. And inside the body, we look at the cell membrane as the brain of the body. This is the first line of communication we have from the outside world to the inside world. And there's epithelial linings everywhere. everywhere. Remember, they're the thinnest on the lungs. So you really got to keep that microbiome and the integrity of your epithelium, which is very complicated, very nourished. How do you keep it nourished? Don't toxify
Diversity
it.
of microbes,
Yes,
microdiversity.
diversity, and balance. You got to have, well, why people are getting so sick is because we have a lack of diversity, or we have an overgrowth of something that throws us out of balance.
Yeah,
And
and
that,
that happens because nature abhors a vacuum. So anytime you're using those disinfectants and you're taking away not just some kind of life, you're taking away all life because you're literally applying poisons. So when you leave that instantaneous moment, life hates a vacuum and will fill it with anything. And there are the microbes that happen to be there first sometimes are the types of microbes that are there to fill the void quickly and to do a great deal of work. And that is not always to a human's advantage. So they take up a lot of space, and then the diversity slowly filters in over time. But meanwhile, you've got these conditions of a facultative anaerobic type that are not going to make you feel very good or be very healthy. So
yeah. And it's just important that we look at ourselves as we're so much more microbes, like 10 to the something huge amount, than we are cells. We're actually very few cells, which is why we know that health is not like, you can't just address health as a cellular thing. We really have to address health as a multi-bacterial, protozoa, fungi, parasite balance, because the cells, I just learned this, and let me see if I can explain it.
This is a picture of a cell, by the way.
Cells are so beautiful. I'm just really starting to appreciate their function and, what they do and how they work and how they're birthed and how they duplicate and the power of the stem cell and where that comes from and how to regenerate that. But the cells literally are wrapping around the microbiome. There's so much more of the microbiome than there is of the cells. But the cells sort of work around all this genetic material that's coming from the microbiome. 50% of that microbiome is, from retroviruses and viruses. You can't have good genetic expression by killing anything. This virus is in and out, but our entire DNA, all 20,000 cells are, half of them come from viruses that are in the cell. We're not going to kill them. We can't kill our way to health. We can adapt our way to health.
Mm-hmm.
We can change, adapt. It's really about adapting and that flexibility that you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe, just as the, it's a reflective principle, as above, so below. Like, it's pretty simple. If we just sort of like look very closely at our attitude and our attentions and what's important, because we are our attention. So if we just know that we can thrive, then we know we're going to want to spend our time thriving rather than in fight or flight,
I love that. And if we can just catch our attention in stressful memories, ideas, concepts, things like that, it might take some practice, but the more you can recognize.
How did you get good at that? How did you get good at that? I would visualize a record player, and I would catch myself thinking something negative, and I would literally visualize like lifting the needle.
I love that.
Did you have any like mechanisms?
That one definitely worked for me. And I think, I'm still trying to catch myself. I think I do a lot of, I think the revision thing really helped me, like at night. Hey, at nighttime, just really kind of previewing the day, revising the day and going, I hate that I said that, or I really feel bad about, usually something I did or said or didn't say or how I said it. And in my mind, I would relive it the way that I want to, because you know it's going to come up again.
Right.
And I would use that revision process to really make new grooves in my mechanical behavior in my lower bodies.
It works. You can revise history by revisioning into a more healing, balanced approach, right? Just through imagination and revision. I love that so much.
Imagination is so powerful. And if we don't use it, it's going to be used against us. And we have the power to think about whatever we want. And it just takes a little bit of recognition. And then just like someone just said, practice, practice, practice. I mean, that's all we're here to do is just, we know it. Let's just go back to the very beginning. We're not going to live a perfect life or be perfect human beings, but we can practice at getting better and upgrading our intelligence in all our life forms. You know, our immune system is intelligent, our nervous system is intelligent, our brain can create neuroplasticity. Everything has a level of intelligence, but you can't isolate anything. You can't isolate your immune system or your brain or your gut and think that you're going to get there. The intelligence has to come from the diversity of the outside world and the inside world.
Wow. I kind of want to, do you mind, can we revisit one quick little thing?
Yes.
I remembered what it was. So the humic acid in the nasal passageway, dude, that like sparked a whole lot of connections. What is that information? Can you touch on that a little minute?
Yeah, so this was new information to me. It's again, all Zach Bush information. Okay. He was talking about that the sinus passages in the nose and the upper respiratory tract is a direct route down to the microbiome of the gut.
Oh, hell yes.
And that is also
the brain too.
In the brain, and a lot of people are having neurological conditions as a result of getting coronavirus, like losing your scent, your nose, losing your ability to smell and hear, neurological. And so when we rebuild the diversity of this huge pathway, then it goes downstream.
Okay, well, let me just pause you there because that was the biggest thing I noticed. I walked into the restaurant last night and I could smell her perfume, and I've lost my sense of smell. I'm losing my sense of hearing, but being in this pile it brought my sense of not only my tactile senses, I was able to feel what I was emoting, and I was able to smell your amazing perfume. And I just felt like I was in my 10-year-old body again. It was crazy.
I don't know.
The microbes, the bath, this IMO5, you guys, is insanely healing, and we'll get into that modality. Oh, that's a cool picture.
This is a picture of the microbiome in the upper respiratory tract.
Oh, wow, dude. Again, I need that chart. That is amazing.
It's in your notes.
Oh, I did read them today. Yes, teacher.
Yeah, you have it.
Yes, Christy. I've got lots of mistresses around here. They need to keep me in check, dude. It's ridiculous.
I have so many notes on this topic, and I'm going to be going deeper into not just coronavirus. I mean, I kind of feel like we can have this conversation a few more times, but
yeah,
let's just spread the information.
Yes.
That no one's dying from the coronavirus. They're dying from chronic inflammation, a breakdown of their microbial diversity and the integrity of their epithelial lining, and pollution is contributing to it.
Cyanide poisoning,
all these things that we can really regenerate and combat. And doesn't mean you're not going to get sick, but think of getting sick as acute inflammation in your body, mobilizing the reserves that you have from good food so that we can always be upgrading the intelligence of our immune system. The neuroimmunological memory, everything is adapting and regenerating. And even the aging process, as we start to slow down, we don't have to die sick. we can literally just start to slow down and then start to relax. Now, I of course, I have not gone through that yet, but I do feel like there's many, many moments where I'm actively preparing for it by viewing from the end. And I think about death.
That is a beautiful way to go. When you finally just say, okay, I've got about 10 more paces to that apple tree, and you sit down at the base of the tree of wisdom and you just relax into the next level. Like that is like I got chills right now. My microbe said hell yes right now.
Yes. And we're dying all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of the balance. Every day cells are dying, and we have the right kinetic energy and the frequencies to bring in healthier cells. You look at people, some people age really well and some people age really poorly. It's because of the frequency that they're bringing and regenerating cells with, because you're going to be making cells until your very last breath. And you can
always start regeneration. You can always start the process of regeneration. It's never too late. Life wants to thrive. Life wants to live. So no matter where you are, when you are, who you are, it's a now kind of thing.
It is a now thing. I have to go.
I know. I love you.
I love you. Yes, good vibes only. Really, we only are a reflection of what we imagine and how we think and feel. So all of this as a community is just raising the vibration for a better planet in general. I love that. I'm going to get my feet on the soil. In fact, I need to buy and get some soil from you. I hate the word dirt. Dirt is like a bad word.
Yeah,
I need to get some soil. I need to get some soil from you. You're so welcome.
You could even say living soil. I need to get some
living soil. Yes, I drink living water. I want living soil. Exactly. I want to be contributing to upgrading my intelligence on every single level.
And
thank you.
It informs each other. The soil, yeah. I'm so happy you're here, Christy.
Thank you for having me. I've been really excited to, of course, see you and talk to you again, and then start spreading the good word about viruses and their genomic information that only makes all of us more intelligent and connects us.
And I'd love to have you over on Tara Lee Live. And I'd love to also have you over on Hi Curious if you're down.
I'm down, girl.
Okay.
You know it.
All right. Kisses.
Mwah! Love you. Bye, y'all. Bye.